All right. Hello, everyone. If you've already joined, we're going to just wait a minute to get folks, give folks a moment to get started or join us, and then we'll get started. All right. Well, without further ado, let's get started. Got a few hellos in the chat. So I see a hiya and a hello all. So good to hear from some of you. I'm going to be presenting today, talking about Power BI and some ways of getting to data. Caroline is going to be also with us and just helping to facilitate and moderate, and she'll be doing a better job of tracking the questions than I will. So she'll be able to, we'll jump over a few times just to see if we have any questions, and I'll make sure we have some time at the end to answer any questions too, in addition to throughout the session. This will be recorded today, so you can always come back to it. But without further ado, let's get started. I'm going to share my screen. And I'm sharing a share, so let me get away from that. And I just clicked Sorry about that. Am I coming through okay now? Well, that was fun. Caroline, am I coming back through now? Okay, I just saw yup. Caroline and I have only been on for 15 minutes just having a chat. Everything worked great, but boy, that was fun. So let me try this one more time. My apologies. I'm going to try to share one more time. All right. Looks like this is working. So, hello everyone. I'm Barton Dyson. I'm with a company called npAutomate. We provide services to Blackbaud Blackbaud users, companies that use Blackbaud. Spent a lot of time specializing in developing automations and custom reporting for Razor's Edge and Financial Edge, in addition to complementary products. So here's a few reasons why nonprofits are embracing Power BI. First off, for any type of analysis that may coalesce or across a few different systems, like looking at revenues and expenses, right? Revenues are in one system like Razor's Edge, expenses maybe in another system like accounting. For example, just joining data from a few different locations or doing something that one system by itself can't really support with its built-in reporting. In addition, allowing you to get more of a holistic view of your constituents, maybe other things that you aren't always tracking in Razor's Edge that is being tracked in other places. So what Power BI does for you that goes beyond some of your built-in dashboards and some of your built-in capabilities is to give you the ability to have a broader view of the people that you're working with. And so we always like to say people and process drive technology, and it's not the other way around, right? Let these requirements and what you're looking for drive what you're trying to accomplish. And that's where this can be of value because it can be configured very quickly. Before I go any further, just since I'm sharing my screen, I can't see exactly what's going on. Just want to ensure we're all connected. Everyone's good, right? Okay. Great. So one of the things we always encourage folks to do when we help organizations, come up with a custom reporting strategy is, beyond Razor's Edge, beyond Financial Edge or other Blackbaud solutions, consider other data sources that you need to be able to capture and get to within the solution. What are other pieces of data that you need? And it could be other systems that you connect to. It could be other components like ticketing or volunteer management or procurement. It could be data that's sitting in Excel, right? Or spreadsheets or Access. So, consider what else you'd want to see that if you were able to combine these pieces together, or perhaps you're doing it manually to some extent on a periodic basis, how would it be of value to join some of those pieces together for you to see a little more information? So there's a number of different ways to, once a report is created and once Power BI is used to build out some unique and custom analytics, there's a number of ways to get to that information. So some of the ways we've helped organizations in the past is feeding reports through Microsoft Teams, feeding reports within Blackbaud, RE or FENXT, for example, on a tile, on a specific page, on the home page, or a pop-up, for example, or even a flyout from the right. So a few different ways that reports can be embedded within the system so they don't have to go somewhere else. You could also embed these reports within SharePoint, for example, or other data sources, or other solutions that you use for reporting, even a website, either an internal or external website. There's also a Power BI app that can be leveraged for reporting. And then anything else, any other web tool that supports an iframe, again, like SharePoint or something like that, to support your requirements. So Blackbaud's done a really good job of embracing these capabilities and has for a number of years now. Power BI just being one of the components of the Microsoft Power Platform that allows for combining some of these unique processes and components and embedding it within the system. Another advantage to nonprofits like yourselves is that the pricing for these items is really advantageous. So it doesn't cost a lot for you to buy Power BI licenses using the nonprofit pricing for your users to be able to access reporting. And you don't need the premium license. You don't need the highest level license. Typically, a pro license is sufficient to gather and capture what it is you're trying to get to. There are a number of ways to connect Blackbaud data to Power BI, whether you're hosted by Blackbaud or whether you're running local. But we're going to focus on these last two green lines today, the Razor's Edge NXT and the Financial Edge NXT, which I would imagine most of you are over to at this point. Before that, really, your best option was to access the data directly if you weren't hosted. Which can be challenging in of itself because there's a lot of tables, or using queries, right? Running queries and exporting information and using that to create reports. Leveraging NXT and leveraging the Sky API and some of the other connections really does give you a lot more flexibility in terms of getting connected and finding other ways to keep data up to date, keep it refreshed, and interact with it throughout the system. In some cases, there may be pieces of data that you just can't get to within NXT. Maybe there's not what we call an endpoint quite yet available. One of the nice things Blackbaud has added more recently is the ability to use queries and access those through the Sky API also. So there's a couple of good sessions on that this week that I encourage you to check out, or take a look at some of the documentation or in the community area about how to also take advantage of queries to get data that you might want to leverage. And so those green lines do provide you with options to access data through the Sky API and push it to different locations, right? Whether you're pushing it to an Excel document, whether you're pushing it to SharePoint, or whether you're pushing it to some type of data repository like Azure or SQL. And that's what we'll be looking at today as an option. And then finally, that last box and the embedding Power BI within Blackbaud solutions, that's only available within NXT. And so that's something that is an advantage. If you don't want your users to have to go somewhere else to look at information, you want them to be able to see it directly within the system. So let's take a look at a few examples of what that looks like. Let's see here. So here is an example of a report that can be run out of Razor's Edge, but it's a Power BI report. It's a full screen report. So it's taking up the entire screen, as you see here. And it's showing a few things. Not only is it showing how much money came in for an event, but it's also showing expenses that came from an accounting system. In this case, that came from Financial Edge. So it's a nice way of being able to, again, combine data from the money that came in for an event or an appeal and the money that was spent on that to see how that's lining up for some period of time. This same type of information could be leveraged within an event record, for example. So here's a Razor's Edge event that instead of just seeing an overall report for all of your events, here's an actual event record where we can also embed Power BI reports directly within the event page itself. This is a little example of actually putting tickets on a page or making it look like tickets to show revenues, expenses, and maybe coming up with calculations of cost per person, revenue per person, and various things like that, so that you have all that data to work with. Then you could have other visuals. And one thing you'll note is that there's no specific way to look at information or to run reports. It's really specific to each organization and what types of measures and what types of components they're trying to accomplish to get the output that they want. And that's one of the beautiful things about Power BI is that, coming up with those measures and metrics that you want to see and then building reports to put that together. A couple other quick examples here. Let me jump forward. Here's an example of some external information, for example. Maybe there's more program management that's taking place in another solution somewhere, but we'd like to display that, again, within Razor's Edge to show not only fundraising and revenue components, but also what types of interactions we're having with folks from a program management perspective. And so providing a way from the homepage to see some of those analytics here. Don't want to forget about our accounting folks that might be attending using Financial Edge. Here's some visuals of how you can get a better sense of overall activity, whether it's by grant, by program, by overall expenses. And one thing you'll note is that when you look at reports like this, providing the ability for people to change date ranges, filter down on functions, or click on certain items to see more detail of what's behind this information as you drill in for more data. Just another view essentially of some financial data, combining donations year over year, combining grants by program year over year, operating expenses, and grants by sub-programs, for example. So what I'd like to do next is do a quick little screen share to talk about one of the ways that we can connect NXT data into Azure, which we always feel is the best and most efficient way to build Power BI reports. You can certainly use Excel or other solutions, especially if you put them in, say, SharePoint, Excel sheets. If you put them in SharePoint, it's going to be a little easier to refresh that data. So we certainly think that's a good idea. But before we do that, let me just jump back to our meeting and want to see if we have any questions so far. I think we are good. No questions yet. Great. So I'm going to share again. And so it all starts with figuring out, again, what data we want to work with and what data we want to try to pull. So in this specific example, I'm going to be grabbing data that comes from General Ledger and actually pulling transactions from the GL. So one of the first things you want to do is go find the thing that you want to get to, right? So go find, when you go to developer.blackbaud.com, and when you go to the API section, go find the thing that you want. It may already be published by Blackbaud for you to get to that item, like a list of constituents or a list of actions or something like that. Or it may not be something that's available. One thing that you'll note is that with anything related to Financial Edge, there isn't a specific Power Automate component to get to that. And so if you want to use Power Automate to pull data, you need to use this piece that's called the Blackbaud Sky add-in. So this option to send an HTTP request is what we use quite a bit to get to things that aren't already published and available within Power Automate. Now, there's other ways to get to data, but Power Automate provides a really simple way of grabbing data and getting it over to a source like SQL. There's also partners that can help. I mean, it's work that we do. There's also other folks and other organizations that can help, get the data out on a recurring basis and get it over to you. But in order to really push this data over, it comes down to these 3 steps. First, it's setup. You need to make sure that you've gone to the marketplace for your environment, a Razor's Edge and Financial Edge, and selected that MS Power Platform option, which allows Power Automate to connect to your data source. If you're going to be connecting to Azure SQL, you need to make sure you have an instance of Azure SQL. Much easier to connect data to Azure SQL than it is to try to connect it to a local version of SQL, which can be really hard to automate refreshes. And then another step of that setup is just making sure you have a Power Automate and Power BI license. The Power Automate license is really only necessary for the person who's going to be writing and implementing the solution that will be pulling the data on a regular basis. Then you want to find those endpoints, the things that you want to grab and pull over into a data repository for reporting. It could be using existing connectors that are already published by Blackbaud. A lot of the ones in Razor's Edge are already there, but there's still a few that aren't. Or using this Sky add-in that I just highlighted called the HTTP call. And again, I encourage you to take a closer look at this new query API, which Blackbaud has recently released, which gives you even more flexibility to really build out a query within Razor's Edge, within Financial Edge, get the exact fields that you want, and then send that over either to a report directly through Excel or CSV, or over to a data repository to get to other data that either you want it to do some calculations for you, or you just don't want, it's just other data that you can't get to within the system. And then finally, pulling the data and reviewing those results, which we're going to look at in just a moment, to see what type of information you're getting from that specific component, from that specific piece of data. So you can define the table and set up what you want. So let's take a closer look at what that looks like. Within this specific example of just pulling transactions, GL transactions from the system, I already went to the developer site and discovered that this is the endpoint that I need. I need to pull distributions for GL transactions. And you have a few different parameters that you can use. Those are all published on those pages for each piece. And so I just want to make sure that I pull the first 5,000 items that are in the list. So if we run a test here, and we get some data, this data is presented to you in what is called a JSON. And it pulls out up to 5,000 items. Most pieces within RE and FE will give you a limit of 5,000 if you specify that. So then if you need more, you can ask for the next 5,000 and the next 5,000 using an offset. I think what's a really good idea to do is to use some type of parser to be able to figure out what these fields really mean. One that I like to use is called this JSON viewer stack.hu. It's a pretty good one. It appears to be pretty safe. But there's lots of just JSON viewers where you can paste in information and then be able to see it basically translated for you. So you can see per record what fields are being provided, what types of values you're getting, which things you want. And you don't have to pull every one of these items into a table. Just pull in the things that are most important for you and the things that you're really looking to accomplish. So once you see this per item of what you want and what you're looking for, then you can create a table. And again, these tables can be created within Azure, but you can use a local version of SQL management to be able to work with these items and interact with it. So you want to create a table that will match up with those specific items that you're looking for. So you know the transaction ID, for example, is going to be, you know, an integer, for example, and the distribution ID is going to be that unique piece. Within the accounting system, you could have a specific line item that's distributed to 3 items. So that's where the distribution ID is the 3 items and the transaction ID is the line, for example. If you're looking at constituents, you know, it's a little different. It's the constituent ID or the gift ID that you're focused on, not the main constituent ID, but the system constituent ID. That we're focused on. You also have the constituent ID, which the system will refer to as a lookup ID within the system. But this exercise of getting this started is really a matter of creating a table that will match what you see within this viewer. So then you can do an insert to push data in to match up with that. And so that brings us to this third step of writing an action within npAutomate to insert into that table the items that you have. And if you have more than 5,000 records, you want to ask for more, and then you want to insert those into that same table. So if we go back to my process that ran and edit the specific component, if we go back to this specific process that was run, this insert was taking the result of that get records piece, which was captured down here as the result, and inserting it into this table that we have in SQL. So this connection was made to my SQL practice demo database, and that connection was made. The first time you connect to it, you want to set up you want to define your username and password, and whatever security credentials, Active Directory, anything else you put into place. And then you can do any SQL statements you want to be able to, in this case, insert data into that SQL repository. Now, some folks would rather focus on the reporting and not really spend as much time on this side of it. So again, you've got a number of partners, including ourselves, that offer tools, offer solutions to help you get data out of the Blackbaud solutions and get that into a reporting data lake or repository or something like Azure SQL for you to work with. If any of you would like, a little more depth around how to insert, and kind of the language to use here, you can Google this, or feel free to email me after the meeting, and I'm happy to send you some of the language that's used here to basically say insert into this table, select information from that result we just got that we asked for, and put the distribution ID into the SQL table using the distribution ID that we got from Blackbaud. Put the transaction ID into the SQL table using the transaction ID that we got to Blackbaud, and on and on and on. Then we get to a point where we need to see if we have more data. Do we have more than 5,000 records? In this case, we don't, but if we did, then we can go and we can ask for the exact same thing again, but this time we're going to ask for the next 5,000 records. And we're just going to keep looping through till we get everything. So in some cases, someone could have over 1 million constituents, or over 1 million actions, or 1 million gifts, or 1 million transactions. So this is how you loop through and get to all those items that you might want to see. So coming back to our presentation, that's that last piece I was just mentioning. If you have more than those items, you want to keep going and just use a condition to keep looping through until you get to your full count. I wrote or 500 here because there are 1 or 2 endpoints, like invoices, for example, that only gives you 500 at a time, but most will give you 5,000 at a time that you want to work with. So once you reach the point where you've got the data, you've got it over to a repository for you to report with, it's much easier to build Power BI reports for what you want to see, because you can use tables or you can use views within SQL to report on that data and join tables and views and different pieces together for reporting. There are built-in, within the kind of the Blackbaud developer marketplace, there are some built-in Power BI connectors to RE and FE, but we don't really recommend those because they haven't been updated in quite a while, and they're missing a lot of fields. So typically they don't quite offer enough. There can be performance implications trying to leverage those two with larger systems. So our next step is to connect NXT over to Azure. So first off, you need the Power BI desktop, which if you don't have it already, you can download that from the Power BI service online. And you want to get connected to the SQL data. Make sure you've got the credentials. So let's take a look at that step here. So this is Power BI, the local version. And this is the online version of Power BI that you can quickly get to just by clicking on your little MS 365 options and going to Power BI. If you don't see that, you may need to get somebody to add that license for you to get over to it. And what you want to do is you want to build your reports over here locally and then publish them. And so that'll be step 2 to get this information over to a location where you can embed it and display this information into other locations. So you're going to be able to get to the data using a number of different options. Again, if you've set up some Excel workbooks through SharePoint or something else, you can connect to those. SharePoint or something like that online, or even any online option is best versus just having a local Excel sheet or a local CSV file, because those are going to be really hard to automate the refresh for those reports over time. So you want to use something that's going to refresh more in an automated fashion for you. In our case, we've connected this report to SQL Server. So you want to choose SQL Server and type in your server options, username and password if you need that, unless you have some single sign-on. And we do not recommend the direct query option. That can really just also lead to some performance implications. And it's not really necessary to have a immediate response to every single time you want to view data within a report. So you want to use the import options, and then you can configure this report to refresh, say, on a daily basis. So first configure your API pools to get data over to your data source, and then configure this refresh to run right after that to make sure you've got an updated representation of the data that you want to see. So then it's a matter of just building out the visuals and the different pieces that you're looking to report on, whether it's Razor's Edge information, building out lists, building out cards. Maybe it's some accounts payable information that you want to look at pulling from different pieces using any of the visuals that are built in here. And one of the nice things about Power BI is how pervasive it is and how much online training there is and how many different tools you can use. Getting to the data has always been the hardest part, but once you get to the data, there's some really good training options to help you get to different pieces that you're working with. A great example is a calendar. You know, every one of you might have a different fiscal year and fiscal quarters and fiscal months. So there's some great tools about how to embed these types of calendars directly into reports and pull in all the dates so you don't have to think too much or make a lot of weird formulas to make sure that you're looking at data that matches your fiscal year if it doesn't always start in January and end in December. It's a little tool that can help you there. Then once you've got a report and you're all done with it, you have the option to publish that report. So you want to save it, and then you want to choose to publish it. And that's going to push it up to that online Power BI service. And that's where you're going to be able to then roll it out to folks, because they're not going to be able to see this report if it's installed locally on your machine. So you could set up different folders or different workspaces, shared workspaces for people to get to. I do recommend setting up a shared workspace as opposed to just your own for people to get to these items. And then that will take this information and push it up into a location that you can get to. So that pushes us over to this second step of publishing to the Power BI service, creating that workspace online, save and publish, and then finally the step of scheduling the refresh, which we'll look at in just a moment. So then in order to make sure that refresh is going to work for you effectively, you do want to schedule that flow to run on a recurring basis. So that Power Automate process we saw earlier, you want to tell that, let's say you want to get it updated every night. You want to tell that to run every single night to update the information you have. Sometimes if you don't have millions of records, you can just rerun that process and have it run. It'll take 15, 10 minutes, whatever it takes to update the data itself, wipe out the table and just reload it. There are times where you have so much data, you don't want to reload everything and you want to do what we call an iterative update. So you can accomplish that by just asking for the latest items, any records that have changed in the last day, for example, or since the last time you ran a refresh, and just update those within your SQL system or within your SQL database. So a couple of options to keep things fresh. So you want to rerun the process of getting the data from NXT, and then you want to refresh back at the Power BI service to get that information. So now that we've uploaded that report, this is that report that's been uploaded, and now it's something that we can leverage and roll out to folks. And the best way to do that is under this file section, choosing this option to embed report. And so you have the option from here to be able to see what it would look like if you were to provide that link to somebody. And this is the iframe piece, but this is really what you want to leverage if you're going to just send someone the hyperlink. You first want to make sure they have security to your workspace, which you can define back within that Power BI location. You can click access users and choose who's allowed to see this report. So if somebody gets this hyperlink, but they don't have access, or you don't want them to have access, when they click it, they won't be able to get to anything. They won't be able to see the information. But if they do have access, they'll be able to, just create a shortcut to that item. In addition, this can be published and embedded within Blackbaud, within the solution itself. So that's where you have the ability to go back to the developer.blackbaud.com section, and you want to go to the documentation under Microsoft Power Platform and look at the option to embed Power BI reports using Power BI add-ins. So this is where you can choose if you want it to be on the home page. If you added that application, will display within this specific screen. My system has suddenly gotten very slow, but this is that Power BI report rendering within the system itself. So I'd love to, with the remaining time, especially since I'm hitting some speed issues here, open it up and see if we have any questions. Let's see here. I'm looking through. Hopefully, I noticed people mentioned lagging about 1 or 2 minutes ago, and I was getting the same thing. I do see a question from Lawrence asking, what is the benefit of using SSMS versus a flat file in SharePoint to link to Power BI? It's really a matter of preference, right? If you have flat files within SharePoint that gives you everything you need for Power BI, and you've got some kind of cadence to refresh those flat files, I think that works fine. It's just a matter of volume of data and what you really want to do with it. So if you've got, again, millions of transactions or a lot of data that you want to be able to look at a number of different ways, I think there's some benefits to using Azure SQL to get to that. So, but either one can be used, or they can both be used. I do see organizations that use SQL for some data, but they have other data sources that they're also tracking, where they're capturing like budgets per fundraiser or something else of different types of contacts or number of communications they're making. So this is an option that exists for you to use both SSMS or SQL in addition to flat files within SharePoint. Yeah, let's go back. A couple people wanted to see that last embed option because we all lagged, but it looks like we're working again. So let's see if we can share that one more time. I'll close my PowerPoint just to see if that helps at all. All right, so that last step, the first thing we want to do is capture this link, and specifically this report ID piece and everything after it that we're looking to pull in to the report. Then through documentation, if you go to the developer.blackbaud.com and go to the Microsoft Power Platform section and look at Power BI, this is going to give you really good instructions on how to create a tile, on a page, on the home page, like my example. And so it'll give you all the different elements and pieces that you want to embed into the system. Then what you need to do is go over into that same developer.blackbaud.com site and go to My Applications. And that's where you embed these reports into the system. So you create an application, give it a name, and then you jump down to that specific item that you'd like to display. And that's this one. and you use that documentation from Blackbaud to see, hey, this needs to be a Power BI tile. So it gives you that part, but then it tells you that you need to embed that report ID and everything that came after that from that other link that we just saw. Then you can do some other things like give it a title. I wanted it to be called procurement analysis, so it would say that across the top. Remove the inset so we don't have a lot of emptiness around it, and then determine what kind of height that we want. So all those pieces help to kind of organize this report and the information that we're seeing as it's being displayed. So I know we're getting close to time, but hopefully that was a little bit helpful there. But all the instructions are on this Power BI section of getting this item embedded and walking you through that. So go to developer.blackbaud.com and then go to the Power Platform. Love it. Someone said this is a game changer. I think so. And I think this ability to be able to embed is exciting, right? It's been around for a while, but it's really useful for people to be able to see this information on records and on things in the system. A question of, could I do this to add, for example, a gauge that shows how much of a pledge a constituent has paid down? Certainly you could. Maybe on the gift record, on the pledge record, you could show something like that. You want to use the context to be able to make sure you're getting to the right pieces of data. Pledges and pledge installments and pledge payments are a little bit trickier, but there are some endpoints to help you get to that information. Or again, you may want to use a query to get to that. So a few different options that exist there. Caroline, I think you wanted to cover one or two items at the end of this call, so I might turn it over to you. I think we've answered all the questions.
Excellent. Thanks so much. We're going to launch a survey here in just a moment, everyone. If you guys can just take a second and give us a review, that'd be really, really appreciated. Thank you all so much.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry about the audio issues, but I think we made it through. So. All right. And with that, we appreciate everyone's time today. If I can answer any more specific questions or provide some more clarity, feel free to email me at barton.dyson@npAutomate.com. And happy to speak further. Thank you, everyone.